One of the themes that's constantly run through this year is the concept that making a car drive itself is easy to some extent and then really hard from that point onwards. We've covered lots of stories surrounding the development of Tesla's full self-driving beta. We've covered companies that have made the transition to operating robotaxi fleets in the US. And of course, we've also covered the installation of an open source project that you can put in your own vehicle, the Comma 3 system, which in the case of my wife's Chevrolet Bolt EV is running a branch of OpenPilot called OPGM. But earlier this month, Cruise, which is General Motors' special autonomous vehicle division, lost permission to drive without a supervisor in the state of California. And we've had lots of people ask how our system's performing and just what's going on with autonomous vehicles. So today we figured it would be the ideal time to try and answer some of the questions around Cruise, answer why we are getting so hung up on autonomous driving and why that is a total distraction, and also give you a bit of an update on Comma 3 and OPGM. Let's go there. To start today's video, I want to give you a quick update on OPGM. That's the OpenPilot GM branch of the OpenPilot software that's running on Comma 3 hardware in my wife's Chevrolet Bolt EV. Lots of people have been asking some very good questions about the hardware and our experience with it. And I want to iterate here that OPGM, in fact, OpenPilot as a whole, and the Comma hardware that it runs on is all basically pre-production. You can buy the Comma 3 hardware and it looks great and it's basically a finished product, but you buy it as a dash cam and then you have to install the semi-autonomous OpenPilot software or your branch of choice onto the hardware. And that requires you to have at least a passing knowledge of software development. It is also not fully autonomous driving. I've got my hand off the wheel right now. I just took it off and the current branch of OPGM is actually handling the road really well. I'm not having any issues with the vehicle. I'm not having any issues with staying in the lane, and it's pretty good, but it is still very much pre-production software and you are engaging in software testing in order to get it on your vehicle. And a bit like FSD beta, you're helping develop the software by allowing it to be used on the road in the real world, gaining miles and miles of test data. And when it does weird things like it's doing right now, it hit a bump in the road and the steering took a while to respond, it can be kind of scary. There are also things that this vehicle cannot do. It currently doesn't have the ability to do emergency braking as part of OPGM because of the way that General Motors interfaces with its emergency braking module. Again, we've got a little bit of ping-ponging, so I'm just going to grab the steering wheel and hope that it stays in the middle of the road. Basically, OPGM, just like any form of OpenPilot, is like having another person in the car with you, making sure that the road around you is safe, making sure that you are driving safely, and providing an extra pair of eyes. Or rather, more appropriately, you have a teenager doing the driving, and you, as the parent, have to be the one to step in and go, hang on, no, there's a big truck in your blind spot, or whatever it happens to be. Right now, I'm following a distance from the car in front, and OPGM is slowing down this car so that I maintain that 2-second gap. That's not a feature that this car does natively, so I've added extra features to the car, but it's still something that I shouldn't rely on every single day to allow me to be fully distracted behind the wheel. It is a level 2 system, and like every other level 2 system out there, including Tesla full self-driving, you must remain in control at all times, be willing to take over if something was to go wrong, and be willing to get yourself out of a muddle. Another question that some of you asked was that you noted that in the Discord server for OPGM, I pointed out that some of the behavior of this car was not as great as it was on previous releases. And we went through some release cycles where the behavior of this car, under whatever model happened to be in that version of OPGM, was worse than previous iterations, and it's very much a suck it and see approach. Right now I can see that traffic in front of me is slowing down, so I'm actually going to put my foot on the brake, or rather put my hand on the brake lever on the steering wheel and just take over manual control of the speed. I'm still allowing the car to do the steering, but I have full speed control, so I can slow the vehicle down by taking my foot off the accelerator. When I've reached a point where I feel that the car can take back its longitudinal control, then I will let it do that. But until then, I'm controlling the speed, and the steering wheel is just ever so gently moving in my hand as the car keeps itself in the center of the lane. You also have to be ready for things like this cement truck deciding to pull in front of me. I saw that it was going to move in because I could see what the wheels of the truck was doing. I could see from its lane placement that it was going to move in, and I was using kind of all of my motorcycling skills to watch for changes in other vehicles long before they put the indicator on. Now, OpenPilot and no other semi-autonomous system that I know of, or in fact fully autonomous system, can infer as much from other road users as quickly as we just did. They have to play the mathematical game of predicting what they think is going to happen. I inferred what was going to happen based on my years of driving and my experience in a car, and that is a big difference. Which brings me to Cruise and some of the things that happened in the last month that have caused the CEO to step down this week, as well as one of its co-founders. If you're not aware, about a month ago now, there was an accident in San Francisco which resulted in a pedestrian being dragged about 20 feet along the ground by a Cruise robo-taxi before the vehicle came to a stop and she was able to be rescued. She did sustain some serious injuries as a consequence of this collision. But what you may have missed in the headlines was that she wasn't actually initially struck by the robo-taxi. Not that this makes it any better, because it's equally as horrific, especially in a future where we're told robo-taxis are going to become the norm. So what happened was she was crossing the road in San Francisco at an unexpected point. Another vehicle driven by a human hit her, and the result of the collision with that vehicle put her in the path of a Cruise robo-taxi. Cruise robo-taxi then collided with her and dragged her along the road. I think the vehicle was doing about 7 miles an hour, dragged her along the road for about 20 feet before everything came to a standstill and she was able to be rescued. Now that is, as I have already pointed out, an horrific accident for anyone to survive, and it is terrifying to think that could happen to anybody. And as a consequence of this collision, combined with other collisions that happened in San Francisco, where Cruise robo-taxis were involved in various different incidences, one of which involved a fire truck, I believe. Not to mention moments where Cruise robo-taxis were turning up streets that had been blocked and getting stuck in wet concrete and all manner of other things. Basically, Cruise's permission to operate an autonomous robo-taxi service in the state of California was pulled. California DMV was like, no, you're done. For now, you're done. We're done. We're not going to let you carry on testing this technology on our roads until we are satisfied that you have made the necessary changes to ensure that your vehicles operate safely and within the bounds of the law. So now, instead of being allowed to operate in California with nobody behind the wheel, Cruise must ensure that any of its vehicles, when they go out on the road, have a fully licensed and fully trained supervisory driver sitting behind the steering wheel, effectively doing the kind of thing that I'm doing right now, making sure that the vehicle operates as it should, make sure that it doesn't jump any lights, make sure that it doesn't cause any collisions or react badly to the world around it. You might note right now I have my hand on the wheel and my foot is hovering over the brake pedal, and that's partly because there's a biker, and bikers are harder to spot and harder to interact with. And as a biker myself, I was fully aware of where that biker was and what they were doing, but the car, just by a matter of statistics, has a lot less practice with bikes than it does with cars. And I was actually reading on the forum just yesterday, on one of the forums for OPGM, that a lot of users in Europe are commenting that OPGM in Europe really doesn't understand how motorcyclists use the road in Europe and some of the things that motorcyclists are allowed to do in Europe as opposed to in the US, for example. So it's really important that you supervise exactly what's going on at all times. How do motorcyclists behave differently? A good point is this guy right in front of me. They are sat exactly where they should be sat as a motorcyclist. If someone was to ram me and I was to ram them, they would have an escape route. If they were sat right in front of my vehicle, they would have nowhere to go in the case that somebody hit me and pushed me into them. They have an escape route, and very often autonomous vehicles don't know anything about that. They just assume, maybe because the motorbike is so far over, that they're not even in my lane. They might be in a different lane. And I'm not saying that this is something that OPGM has that I have experienced, but I know other people who are using semi-autonomous systems that go, that these systems don't understand how motorcycles are ridden and driven. Which brings me to the matter of BMW and Mercedes-Benz and their level 3 semi-autonomous driver assistance systems. They each have different names, but Mercedes-Benz now operates a level 3 hands-off autonomous driver assistant under certain circumstances in Germany and now in certain US states. And it operates at a speed of below 40 miles an hour, 60 kilometers per hour. BMW has announced it's going to do the same thing next year. It's going to bring the same kind of technology to its vehicles with the same kind of restrictions. And people keep asking in the comments, well, that's a bit rubbish. Why does this level 3 hands-off system only work at speeds below, 40 miles an hour? How useless is that? Well, statistically speaking, actually it makes a lot of sense, because a lot of accidents happen when we are in start-stop traffic. And start-stop traffic is very difficult to stay focused and attentive and safe in. And so the idea of BMW and Mercedes-Benz's software is that when you come across really heavy start-stop traffic, you can hand over the driving duties to the vehicle. The vehicle will get you safely through the traffic jam, and then when the speed starts to increase, it goes, hey, I'd like to hand over control back to you again. There are some sensible reasons why this is happening. Number one is reaction time. If you're traveling at 60 miles an hour and you react to something, your reaction time is not just measured in seconds, it's measured in how far you can travel. Now, it's been a long time since I passed my driving test in the UK, but in the UK, you have to remember your driving distances, the number of car lengths it takes you to react to something, like a child running out in front of you. And there's a massive difference between being able to react to something at 40 miles an hour versus being able to react to something at 60 miles an hour. The distance you can travel in that time is far greater when you are traveling that much faster. And I think it's conceivable and fair to point out that Mercedes and BMW are operating their level 3 systems at speeds where they know categorically their vehicles can operate and always intervene in a safe and appropriate manner. They're also doing it because of regulations around semi-autonomous driving. And whenever there's a new technology coming out, it always starts with kind of quite restrictive rules, and then eventually those rules become more comprehensive in terms of, in this case, being able to drive the car without a human behind the wheel. And you have to start with the basic stuff before you can get to the complicated stuff. The other thing that I want to point out is that this level 3 hands-off driver disengaged software that BMW and Mercedes-Benz are operating with, and that even Tesla hasn't yet achieved, is a very different proposition to what I'm doing right now, which is level 2. I am still in control of the vehicle. You know, if something was to happen, I would ultimately be the one to blame. With a level 3 system, if you're told by the car, you know, you can look at your infotainment system and watch a film or play a game, then the car is responsible for it, and there is a legal ramification of that, which means, you know, BMW and Mercedes-Benz have to indemnify themselves against any accidents involving their vehicles that their vehicles caused because their vehicles were doing the driving. That's a big thing, right? It can't be written off easily. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of data to prove to the insurance companies, yeah, seriously, our vehicles are safe. The next thing I want to point out is that all of this semi-autonomous driver assistance and our focus on it actually distracts us from the big problem. And the big problem is driver safety. Statistically speaking, in the United States and in many other countries around the world, there are now more accidents than there were a couple of years ago. Accident statistics are increasing, or collision statistics are increasing. Someone said to me the other day that we shouldn't use the word accident, we should use the word collision or crash. But however you want to refer to it, instances of collisions, crashes, accidents, whatever you want to call it, are on the rise. And they're on the rise for a couple of reasons. One, we are more distracted as drivers. I guess I'm distracted a little bit right now because I'm filming, but I'm trying to, you know, keep my eyes on the road ahead, and I believe personally that I'm driving within my limits. But it's very easy to kind of look down at your mobile phone or to respond to a text message and not to have your eyes facing forwards and looking in your mirrors and making sure that you are safe. I think a lot of that is down to driver distraction, but a lot of it is down to poor driver standards. And autonomous vehicles are trying to step in some ways. And I think a lot of that is down to poor driver standards, but I also think that a lot of it is down to the fact that we are trying to make up for poor driving using semi-autonomous driver assistance features, and that's not how these systems should be used. They should be used as an aid, not as a replacement. And if we want fewer accidents on the road, well, we need to change how our roads are designed, and that's a big discussion that we can make another video about. But we also need to change our attitudes towards driving, because if we can change our attitudes towards how people drive, then we can also change the way that people use the roads. Instead of this speed limit is a suggestion. Is it? Or is this a speed limit to say, hey, you really shouldn't be driving above this speed, and maybe, hey, if the weather's bad, you should drop your speed down a little bit more. All of those things are cultural, and they are learned, and they're bad behaviours that are learned. As someone who learned to drive in the UK, I can categorically say that the US's driving standards are absolutely terrible. And a lot of people over here, if they drove like they do over here in the UK, they lose their license pretty quickly, whether it is speeding, not using indicators, cutting people off. All of those things could land you in a lot of trouble. And statistically speaking, the countries that are the safest are often the countries where they have the strictest driver education programs. Germany has an incredibly difficult to pass driver education program when you compare it to, say, the US and a lot of US states whose driving tests are very much a joke. And yet Germany has autobahns. Sections of autobahns have practically speedless roadways. I say practically, although there's a sign that says you can drive as fast as you want. There are still some practical day-to-day limits, like you can only drive as fast as everybody else. But for the most part, those roads are a lot safer. The autobahns are a lot safer because people have learned how to drive quickly at those speeds. They understand the impacts of distraction and they are safer. And so I'm going to bring this to the conclusion of this video, which is I believe a lot of our semi-autonomous driver assistance technology today is little more than a distraction from what we really need to be focusing on. Better road design, better driver education programs, and explaining to people the limitations of ADAS, advanced driver assistance systems. This, in the car right now, is an ADAS level 2 system. And in the right hands, it can be a great tool, but it is just a tool. We are the meat sacks behind the wheel, and we are responsible for doing all the things when this vehicle is in motion. And while computers are very good at doing the keep a certain distance from the person in front, stay within your lane, they're still not good at doing all of the things that we instinctively do. The inference from someone's lane position, the ability to react to a particular developing situation, contextual understanding, that's a big one. You know, if the road is a little bit glistening in the morning, you should automatically go, oh, it's icy. I need to increase my follow distance. If you're riding a motorbike and you're riding along the road and it's wet and you see a shimmer on the surface of the road, the first thought in your mind would be, oh, that's oil. I need to avoid it if I can in order to stay safe. We've not yet reached that contextual understanding with semi-autonomous vehicles. If I go over something in the road, like a twig or a branch, and it's a substantial size and it clunks against the wheel or the wheel well, or maybe I clip a branch as I'm driving down a country lane, I instantly go, oh, what was that? What was that? Cars can't do that. Semi-autonomous cars and the autonomous vehicles we have today, they don't have that ability to evaluate, is this a danger to me? Can I carry on driving? That's why we get phantom braking, right? Phantom braking is a side effect of the car slamming on its brakes and going, something bad happened, or I think something bad may happen. So there you have it. That's my take on semi-autonomous driving. A bit of an update on OPGM and OpenPilot and Comma. You should only get Comma and OpenPilot if you understand that you are taking part in an alpha or a beta test program. Everything that's been going on with Cruise, and why we are all being distracted by all of these fancy bells and whistles, which are an excellent tool, but we really should be focusing on more affordable vehicles, better driver education programs, and finally, lest I not forget, public transit. Hundreds of billions of dollars are spent every year trying to teach cars to drive themselves because we've convinced ourselves, partly because of Elon Musk and partly because of other people with similar messaging, that self-driving is the utopia of the future where everyone can get everywhere they need to. The reality is that self-driving cars add complexity and cost. That pushes a lot of people out of the ownership possibility. And then it becomes something that is gate kept by how many zeros there are on your pay packet every year. Instead, if we invested those hundreds of billions of dollars into mass transit that was clean, that was green, that was equitable, and that was easily accessible, we would have a much better world to live in.
Thanks for joining me today, and if you've got any thoughts, make sure you leave them below in our Discord chat room, or you can reach out to us on Mastodon. Thanks to the amazing list of people scrolling by on your screen right now. They are some of the more than 1,500 people who help fund this channel through Patreon and YouTube, helping us cover our bills, pay our team, and making sure that we can remain 100% independent. If you'd like to join them and see your name listed below, just follow the links. There are a range of different tiers you can sign up for from as little as $1 a month, or if you pay yearly, just about $10.08 a year. A huge welcome to our newest supporters: Conrad Young, Neon Frog, Siobhan Greeny, Alan Savage, Scotty, Ray Mario, Jennifer, Nesklova, and the Lord of Chaos. Thanks for becoming part of the TE crew. If you'd like to support us with a one-off donation, you'll find links below to make Ko-fi and Bitcoin donations, and we even have an old-fashioned PO box you can reach us at. The address is also linked below. And if you're in need of some swag, you'll find our swag store also in the down below. We've got some great content coming up, so make sure you're subscribed on PeerTube or YouTube, and we'll see you again soon. We make new videos every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you want more, the mighty algorithm thinks you'll like this video, but we here also think that this one is well worth a look. See you soon, and as always, keep evolving.